Hi guys, my name is Caitlyn-Rae, and I'm going to be talking to you today about sexualization and reward within the movie Cruel Intentions. And this movie was directed by Roger Kumble and is part of my analysis assignment presentation. So, what exactly is the movie Cruel Intentions? When was it made? Who's it starring? All the juicy details. So, this movie was actually starring and produced, and I should say directed, rather, sorry, by Roger Kumble in 1999. So, we're at the height of the hype of the new century, and we're actually starring Reese Witherspoon, Ryan Philippe, one of my favorite actors, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, one of my favorite actresses, and Selma Blair as well. And to the left, you can actually see a movie poster. It doesn't include Selma Blair, but we'll introduce her later. So basically, these four characters are here's the movie background, sort of. So these four characters, it's a teen thriller, and it stars Reese Witherspoon, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Philippe, and obviously Selma Blair, who is going to be the main character, the fourth main character, who isn't as main as the other three, but they're all super close. As you can see throughout the movie, if you happen to watch it, she's going to be the brunette that's located on the far left on the floor. And it centers around a bet placed between the two wealthiest and spoiled stepsisters that attend their private school that they go to. So the two step siblings are obviously Sebastian Belmont, who is played by Ryan Philippe, and Catherine Mertoy, who is played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. And they're basically placing a bet to take a young woman's virginity, who is played by Reese Witherspoon, who is off to the right, and in order to win a car or the privilege to have sexual intercourse with each other. And this is basically a play on each other's emotions, and the entire movie is something about their sexual tension and the way that she teases him, he falls for it. There's so many different ways that this movie communicates gender stereotypes, and I'm really excited to talk with you guys about that today. So basically, we have about five proposed theories and concepts that we've used in Cruel Intentions. One of them includes misogyny. Second is parental modeling theory. Third is the cult of domesticity. Fourth is the psychodynamic theory, excuse me. Fifth is going to be the Bechdel test. So all five of these are used within the Cruel Intentions movie. And if you follow any of the other movies, this is actually a series of movies. So I would definitely check those out if you guys have the chance, but definitely look for those theories. So the first theory is actually misogyny, and misogyny is basically textbook defined, and we all know in our textbook gendered lives as hatred of woman, and that is on page 283. Now, Sebastian Valmont is one of the main characters in Cruel Intentions, and he exemplifies concept of misogyny to its very essence. And I would say this man, and at the time he's a boy, but he often acts like a man in the way that he has like these sexual desires that are very grown up and sort of like twisted in a way that you wouldn't expect out of a teenage boy. He plays somebody who is very vicious in the way that he attacks women using sex, and that's all he thinks about whenever he thinks about women. It's not really their characteristics, who they are, their personalities. It's just constantly talking about sex, and that's the only thing he sees. So basically, we see in various quotes that Sebastian can clearly uh, demoralize and really like villainize the woman that he sleeps with, and basically, he kind of makes them regret it. It's really scary the things that he does and kind of gets away with throughout the film, and how it leads to his inevitable death. Excuse me. So the first quote we have is, "I'm sick of sleeping with these insipid Manhattan debutantes." And insipids, excuse me, is a synonym basically for boring. And he basically thinks that all women that he is surrounds himself with are constantly catering towards his needs, and that they're all boring, and they're all rich. They're just the same. And he doesn't see anything in them except for, let's put this plainly, their bodies. sex, vaginas, breasts. That's all he sees in women. And this can be seen as a hatred of women because he's not really valuing the woman as a whole. He's rather looking at her for the way she's shaped or the way that she gives him gratification. He's not really seeing the personality, and he kind of hates it. He hates it so much that he has to keep sleeping with them in order to shame them. It's not actually in here, but in the beginning of the movie, he actually coerces and sleeps with a therapist's daughter that he's been going to. He tells her that she has great legs and posts her pornography on a website after she's been admitted to Princeton in order to ruin her chances of getting in. He hates women, and even though he's attracted immediately to our character Annette, which we'll introduce later, he wants them to feel a pain because he has that pain inside of him and he can't understand why. And as you can see in the picture, the first picture to our right, I can't feel sorry for myself because I'm a poor little rich boy. There's obviously something wrong that's going on in his psyche, but we haven't fully evaluated that until the end of the film. So the second quote, he talks to Annette, who is our main character, who I said was played by Reese Witherspoon, incredible actress. And he says, I just wanted to see what you were like in bed. And this is one of the most shocking, I'm sure, plot twists in the film because we thought, yes, we thought we believed in him, that he was right, that he's actually going to change this time. And then after one moment of talking to Catherine, he's immediately whipped into thinking that this girl is just a conquest. And that's what he sees her as. And he even says that later, that she's just a conquest. And yes, one can, if you are a true movie lover, you can totally say that Sebastian didn't really mean it, that he was just being manipulated by Catherine. But if you are somebody who knows how the people around you work and knows that you have a choice over who you can sleep with and who you cannot, then you should be able to know that this was wrong. So it does show in essence that he thinks of women as only a conquest and that he doesn't really care about their feelings or emotions and in fact hates them for the way that he is rather just attracted to, the sex rather than the personality. So there's just so much to unpack here with this character, and I'm sure I can go into many examples throughout the film. But yes, I would definitely say that he is a prime example of misogyny. So for our second theory, we have the parental modeling theory, and this is actually by Annette Hargrove. She's the main protagonist and a love interest of the film, and she often is described as a goody two-shoe, and she actually communicates with the parental modeling concept. So we look to our right, and we can actually see the Virgin's Manifest, which is one of the articles that is published in 17 magazine, and the article is basically published because she wants to wait until marriage to have sex. And this is one of the reasons why Sebastian is so adamant about having sex with her, because she does not want it from him. And I think that's kind of like the first time that's ever happened to Sebastian, is because he's so good at seduction as an art, that whenever he is approached by Annette, it seems like he can't understand and he can't stand that she does not want to sleep with him, and it actually intrigues him and makes him even more attracted to her. And yeah, the rest is the film. But in the textbook, we see parental modeling, to get back on track here. Parental modeling is described as a way that parents communicate gender, and that can be through modeling masculinity, femininity, and for heterosexual parents, it's male-female relationships. So examples in Cruel Intentions, we can see that obviously Annette Hargrove is perfect. She's really rich. Not only is she really rich, she has a high moral compass. Her father is the headmaster, the newest headmaster at the school that she attends, along with obviously the other main characters, Cecile, Sebastian, and Catherine. And these characters all go to the school, and Annette is very refined. She knows how to conduct herself in a way that appears mannerable. She lives on a estate that is very well loved. She has great personality traits. She volunteers in an old age home. She's a great woman. very well-rounded. And she learns that from her parents, of course. And her mother specifically tells her and her father to wait until marriage because it's so important to preserve that purity and to follow God. And you can hear throughout the film, Annette is constantly telling, and even at the end, Annette is telling Catherine and the people around her, trust God. Like, God has a plan for you, and this is why you're going through these hardships. This is why. She values herself as not just being beautiful, but not just being beautiful, but also being like smart and intelligent. But she doesn't really like depend on other men around her to tell her that because she knows that in her heart. Like, she doesn't need a person to tell her that she's beautiful because she sees more than just beauty in herself. She's refined and she's popular for it. She might not be the level of success that Catherine Mortoy has, but she's still a straight A student and gets the job done. And the difference between the two characters, and we'll talk about this later, is that you know, Annette is just so pure. And even though maybe sometimes we weren't all in favor of Annette's like her actions, and eventually she does break her abstinence vow because she loves Sebastian so much that she would do anything to keep him. Um, we can see that she just remains pure and very godly. So the next slide, we're going to go to theory number 3, and that is on the cult of domesticity. So when it comes to attempting to uphold her reputation, we have the wonderful Catherine Mortoy, and she is actually the student body president. She's incredibly rich. She's incredibly social. She's a socialite, in fact, and her brother and her are just, her stepbrother, I should say, is Sebastian, and they are just at the top of the food chain of popularity. Everyone knows them. Everyone wants to be them. Everyone thinks that they're perfect, and this is basically the cult of domesticity. Uh, Catherine is expected to stay home, and when she's not at home, she's at school being the perfect motherly figure to her entire student body. And what better way to do that than to become the student class president and be able to fulfill motherly-like duties such as listening and caring and actually acting as a voice for their community. So in the textbook, we can see that the cult of domesticity is described as a cultural ideology during the first wave of the United States feminism that claimed women are suited for and should remain in the domestic sphere. And there are multiple examples in Cruel Intentions that show that Catherine is kind of tried to cling on to what her society sees as what a woman should be and how she should act and how much of a homemaker she should be. And you can see even throughout the film and in these two pictures the beauty and this is even aside from Catherine's evil persona, but the beauty in the way that her room looks. It's perfectly crafted. I mean, look at the different ways that the curtains are hung, the way that the lamp is positioned perfectly, the way that the fruit even is hand picked. Catherine is a woman of taste and a woman who prefers to be suited at home and seen as, mother like without having her sexiness or uh, her promiscuity judged. And we can see that by the quotes that she gives. So for our first quote, we have, God forbid I exude confidence and enjoy sex. Catherine is confident and she's incredibly sexual, but she has to hide it because she is a woman in this society and it would not make her look like the homemaker that they want. And that's in their society something that they demand. They want a woman that's gentle and that is always at home, making sure that everything's clean. And if she's not at home, she's expected to be of a high status and look perfect in the public light. And yeah, this is basically a great quote, and that's why I chose to do it first. And then second, it's okay for guys like you and Court to fuck everyone, but when I do, I get dumped. So Catherine is basically alluding to the fact that she is constantly looked down upon if she doesn't act like a lady, and she has to stick to her household duties and making sure that everything around her is beautiful. But when guys like Sebastian, her stepbrother, he can do whatever he wants because he's a guy, like, oh, he's just a guy being a guy. That's basically what, and that's something that I really enjoyed reading in our textbook, is because Gendered Lives basically taught us that women really, really are based on like these different values of like what they can do in regards to sex. And it's just constantly evolving. It's super interesting. Then our final quote we have, "Do you think I relish the fact that I have to act like Mary Sunshine 24/7 so I can be considered a lady?" So Catherine has to act like a perfect and trained housewife, and she always has to have this air of being absolutely right, having all of these things that make her look as if she has it all together, and act like a mother, even though, she's quite a young lady, same age as Sebastian, and she's very accomplished. But in order to remain popular and to date and hook up with the best guys and keep a guy, she has to forego those traits and kind of like be a little bit more confident in herself. But if she does that and stays to her personality, which is in her own way, like she exudes sexiness, then she's looked down upon. So she kind of has to forbade this I should say, um, gung ho personality. Like she has to look like she's just like happy all the time and always ready to go along with everything, when really she has a brain and thoughts to herself. So it kind of limits her, this cult of domesticity, but she has to hold on to it in actual fact in order to be respected by her peers. So our fourth and second to last theory is going to be the psychodynamic theory. And this is often one of the most perplexed and odd characters that we're going to talk about that actually connects to the psychodynamic theory. And one of my favorite characters, her name's Cecile Caldwell. And Cecile, she's my favorite character is Catherine, but Cecile is definitely her opposite. And Catherine is basically teaching her how to be, you know, a lady and how to exude confidence and be just like her. Because Cecile's mother, uh, who's in the green, as you can see in this single picture, there's a reason why I did that single picture, but her mother wants Cecile to follow Catherine around and look at her because she's the most popular girl at school. We could see Cecile, who is obviously still, a kid, her mother is obviously babied her and made her, because they're rich as well. They're new money though, so they're not as respected. But Cecile's mother wants her to fit in, but also remain true to herself. She's wearing a koala t-shirt with a khaki skirt that rests above her knee. She's still very much a child, but her mother would really like to see her not morph into a different person, but rather change her personality. And I think the way that our textbook describes psychodynamic theory as being the first relationship we have fundamentally influences how we define our identity, including gender. We can see that even Cecile Caldwell, despite her being one of the most attractive and strange characters, is obviously joined to the hip with her mother. She's just like her mother in the fact that she wants to stand out, she wants to be herself, yet she has like these unconventional ways of doing so. And in ways that she's different, like her mother wants her to be this virgin, well behaved, perfect, Mary Sunshine like character that Catherine portrays herself to be. Yet, what we don't know is, even though, to a certain extent, Cecile follows her mother's wishes and goes and learns these different instruments and hangs out with Catherine and does all these things, she eventually kind of falls apart and kind of starts to break what her mother does and finds her actual true self. And though her actual true self might be the way that she dresses with her mother, and maybe her personality stays the same, but I guess her sexuality, her sensuality, and her education develops as she starts to hang out with new people and starts to experience new things. So I really do appreciate this character because I think she kind of embodies gender realization and basically shows that she can be completely herself without having to adhered, and she's still attractive, and she's still a woman, and she doesn't even care about being attractive because she has already accepted herself within, and kind of has this air of nonchalantness to her that I really appreciate. So, theory number 5 is the Bechdel test, and this is the final concept that we're going to be talking about in the film. So, our text describes this as a assessment of gender bias in media that asks us three simple questions, and that is, does it feature two women who talk to each other about something other than a man? And although Cruel Intentions is my favorite film, we can see it's just so obvious that gender bias is so normal throughout the film because it revolves completely around Sebastian, his manipulations, his feelings, and of course, he is a man. And out of these three, we can see that it fails the Bechdel test because both women and Catherine are talking in multiple scenes, but they are talking about Sebastian constantly. And even though, sometimes like at the end, we see that Catherine and Annette are talking about God, and Catherine is obviously doing drugs through her cross, and it just shows that it's just a giant game. And even though they weren't talking about Sebastian in some scenes, they do talk about men a lot and their relationships rather than, their true self. And this test obviously showed it failed, and this film actually is indeed full of gender bias, and I think it was done on purpose. We're seeing the failure of obviously the richer, wealthier class in terms of making sure that they are actually mentally sane and they're doing things that they like. Instead, they're portraying themselves and actually feels like they're acting like their characters. And it actually feels like this movie is so realistic. So that's why I really enjoy it. So, the overall message and final response. One can tell the difference between sexuality and sensuality when watching this timeless and classic film, and it is the senses. While we watch our three main characters, we are not only captivated by their communication of their genders or even how they explain sex, but rather how they express themselves in a society that praises perfection within sensuality. Cruel Intentions marries the idea of gender expectations and youth beautifully, warning that living up to your reputation can lead to a disaster for a recipe. And I think this is definitely a great place to literally think about the multitude of messages that are sent throughout this film. And it's just perfect the way that they talk about gender and how it's not even communicated, and the word gender probably isn't mentioned in the film, but it's so obvious that women and men are expected to live their lives in completely different and outrageous ways, and yet they're all the same. Uh, so, yeah, that is all I have for today. Thank you so much. Please watch Cruel Intentions. These are the references that I have, and I hope you guys have a great night.